So I was mostly just interested in hearing more about your background and or about your time at Cambridge College. So I'm not sure what you want to share, but I'm just going to open it up like that, open-ended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I am, first of all, a graduate of Cambridge College.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that. Alumni.
A lot of people don't know that. I graduated in 1973, and I was in the Philadelphia group. And we would fly in on the weekends for our classes.
Wow.
We stayed at hotels. I remember the Copley Hotel, especially in Boston. And we had our classes on the Newton campus.
Nice. What program were you in?
It was in the education program, and it was the Newton College of the Sacred Heart, which is now BC Law.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of Cambridge College at the time? Or?
Yes, they had classes there in the summer.
Oh, cool. What was the program like then?
Very different. Let's see. I had a pro sem leader, and my pro sem leader was Eileen Brown, the former president.
Yeah.
There were 17 or 16 people in my pro sem, and we met on the Newton campus, and we met in hotels, and we had all-day sessions on Saturdays and Sundays, and then we flew out on Sunday night, going back to Philadelphia, where I taught.
Cool. That's great. And then so after you graduated, is that when somebody asked you to be involved at Cambridge College?
Yes, somebody asked me to be involved in Cambridge College. And so I was involved in 1976 before I was hired in 1977. So I began my tenure in 77, but I worked a whole year just trying to form together what pro sems look like, what courses look like, what coursework looked like, what a summer program looked like. And so I did all of that, got hired in 77. And in that time from 77 to the 80s to the 90s, I helped plan curriculum. And we were in the School of Education. And there was also something called a NITE program, NITE.
I remember that. That was maybe just ended right before I started, or maybe, yeah. So.
And it was headed, of course, by the wonderful Dr. John Grassi. And so I taught in that program for 5 or 6 years, from the early 90s to late 1996, 97, 98. I also worked and helped plan the first early childhood program.
Oh, nice.
At Cambridge College. And that worked very well. Though it did not go initially because of politics and all of that. I also was a founding member of the faculty union.
Oh, wow, nice. Yeah.
There were 5 or 6 of us who were founding members. I also, through Cambridge College, worked in the Boston Public Schools as a consultant with teachers in elementary and secondary education. I went to BC for my doctorate and I graduated in 1988 from BC with my PhD in curriculum, instruction, and administration.
That's great.
I've written several books, but the one that I use in my course is called A Teaching Heart. And I wrote that in 2008. And my daughter gave me the title for that book, and it's still being published.
Great. What's it about?
It's about teaching in the classroom. It's about classroom management. It's about diversity. It's about looking at issues of parenting. It's about looking at learning styles and teaching styles. And it's a collection of just suggestions for how to be a more effective teacher.
Nice.
Students seem to like the book.
That's
I
great.
rather like it too.
Yeah, that's good. How do you think teaching has evolved, in your time?
Ooh. It's still, first of all, it's still evolving. I think early on in the 70s and 80s, teachers had a different perspective of students, that they had this commitment, this drive, this passion that they brought to the classroom. I think where we are now is that teachers are living through COVID-19 and its variants.
Yeah.
I think that they are feeling not as secure because of how they have to teach in a different format. When you've got to teach some in place and some at home, I think it really stresses teachers to a different kind of level. The class that I just taught, first of all, the students were magnificent. They were so wonderful. And they came with a drive that I had not seen for a long time. They came with a caring. They also had a wider perspective on social justice issues and dealing with ethnicity and dealing with diversity and dealing with different family structures. So I found that my students were committed to social issues, understood racism, understood bigotry, understood biases, and looked at how can they incorporate that in their curriculums that sometimes their schools don't want to address.
Exactly. That's great. Do you think it was just that group of students, or do you think that this is a larger trend at teaching?
I think it's a larger trend.
Yeah.
But these students just had a keen sense of the world they live in. They weren't necessarily happy with the world that they live in, but they wanted to make a change. With their classrooms, with their parents, with their neighborhoods that they lived in. They had a sense of immigration and immigrants. They had a sense of homelessness. And some of their students are suffering through homelessness. They had a sense of healthcare issues that their students were going through. They had a sense of learning styles being very different from even when they grew up. And they knew how to talk about it. They knew how to research it. They knew how to and wanted to incorporate this in their curriculums, because in these schools, these issues are touched but not embraced.
What do you mean by that? So you see it in the teachers that they're passionate about this, but you think the school systems where they teach are still behind on these issues?
I think they're still behind on the issues.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's convenient. I think that if you don't have to kick the ball down the road, you don't. I think that schools are trying to be diverse in their faculty, but they're claiming they still don't know where to find certain ethnic groups to teach.
I've heard that, yeah.
And certain neighborhoods are just racially discriminatory in terms of who lives there. And then we got into a wonderful discussion about the Netco program.
That was busing from Boston out to the suburbs. Is that how?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you remember that program?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I helped many of the school systems with their programs because I also, when I moved from Philadelphia to here, I worked in Newton, and Newton had a MECO program. So I worked with many of the people who came into Newton. I also worked with parents. I live in Brookline, who also received MECO students. So I knew the history. What I found in this last class is that the students didn't know the history of MECO.
What is this? I mean, I know they did it to give students experiences in other schools, right? But I don't believe they do it anymore, do they?
Oh, yes. Many cities and towns still have MECO. I know Brookline does. I know Newton does. I know some other school systems do. And it's just knowing that parents wanted more for their children in the 70s. And they wanted a more even playing field. And they were willing to sacrifice a lot. Children got up much earlier, to be on that bus, to be at school by 8 o'clock, which meant the students had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And parents were willing for their children to do that because they wanted a different kind of learning and education. So,
what was the experience like for those students and parents? Do you know?
It was on one level exhilarating, on one level exhausting, because when you went into a new community, it was about connecting with parents in that community. And some parents were not for it. And then you had to have a host parent, a host family. And some of the families were marvelous. And others were a bit estranged and different. And so it was a learning piece for parents who lived in the community, parents who were sending their children to the community, and then having students who were being transported by these buses. Could they participate in other school activities? Because the bus leaves at a certain time to come back into Boston. And so sometimes it was hard for students to play sports or to be in theater and drama. And so host parents sometimes let the children who came in from Boston stay at their homes and spend the night. And then also have these host parents and children come into Boston to see where the children came from. Because there are these misconceptions about poverty and economics and social standing. And many of these parents were very professional. I mean, they were lawyers and teachers and doctors, and so that's not always understood by the community that these children are going into.
Yeah.
So it was a learning piece that took years and years to cultivate.
Sounds like a good experience and a good learning experience for a lot of different people.
Yes.
You don't hear about it much anymore. Do they maybe don't call it Netco anymore? Or do they call it something else?
No, they call it Netco. They get funding from the state. It's just probably interwoven into each of the communities at a comfortable level, so it doesn't have to be talked about.
Yeah, that's good.
Even though some of the issues have not gone away.
Like with stigmatization of students, or some of those are still there.
And many of the students who went to these other communities went on to college, graduated, and have led or lead successful lives.
That's great. It sounds like good work. So you helped to start that, or you were a part of it?
I was a part of it. I didn't start it. Parents started it. But just working with parents, I remember, especially in Brookline, where I live, just dealing with the issues of separate and unequal.
Right.
You know, if your child is having a problem with a teacher, what's going on in that situation? Giving them the skills to navigate these various systems, because they're all different.
Right. Yeah. And depending on where you're from, you might not be taught that hidden curriculum, right?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. So a lot of schools still are segregated, right? Or to a certain degree. I mean,
I
not
think so. I think
perfect.
they are. And then, you know, when you found that there were certain students coming out of Boston who were not put in college prep courses or advanced placement, and then pushing through all of that to make it work.
It's interesting. Netco sounds like it's a possible kind of solution. You know, I don't know.
Yes.
You know, have you heard of are there other things that you know of that have really done some good work in this area to help either integrate schools more or give students more experiences?
Well, MECO is a major piece. I know that certain schools have certain small programs that they work with parents and children just around academics and getting into college. And then you have really a dichotomy of, you have people who are of color who live in the community who get treated very differently than those students being bused in.
So, why is that, do you think?
Because of racism in our systems.
Right. Okay.
And thinking all children of color are the same. And they're not.
So they treat them different, the administrations or the schools?
Administrations, schools, some neighborhood people, yes.
So the idea that a student doesn't come from Newton or wherever the school is, they treat those other students differently because they maybe assume that they are, you know, not as capable or.
Correct. Right. Or they come with a labeling already that they haven't earned. It's an interesting, a word I don't like to use very much. It's a very curious way that people look at students around what they bring to the classroom. And for me, it becomes very simple. Don't teach to their color, teach to their content. But also put yourself in check, because you're walking around with so many biases that you don't even acknowledge. So if you can't acknowledge your own biases and yet you project, then it's hard for you to create sound relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. And teaching is relational. I mean, I think it's all about those relationships that you build that bring people to the place where they're ready to learn, you know.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And so I think you're right. I feel like these biases, like if we're not respectful of our students in particular, you know, I feel like these biases manifest in the classroom or in the way that we hold expectations for our students.
Correct. And also for ourselves. So I saw a lot of that talked about and dealt with in the course that I just taught via Zoom this spring.
Yeah.
I was very pleased with the students' readiness to tackle these issues and do something about it.
Because that hasn't really been the initiative in the past, right? There hasn't been a lot of like you're saying that the students are ready for that, and you think it's probably related to, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, related to this moment, or do you think that it's just a broader trend in teaching that's been happening for some time?
It's been happening for some time. I think that it's been moving toward this point, but it's always been a concern about, how we treat students and looking at different learning styles and different teaching styles to these learning styles. And what we believe as individuals, students are capable of, and giving and permitting students to do what it is that they do best that may not be in concert with who you are as an individual. I always say to my students, people tend to teach to their own strengths.
Right. Yeah.
And if you teach to your strengths and you have a class of 30 people, only 1/3 learn the way you learn. So what happens to those 2/3 of the class?
Right. Learner, they're not involved in the learning.
That's right.
I really think differentiating teaching strategies is very important, and having different approaches for different learners and being respectful of those learners, and
absolutely
first learning needs. That's great. Maybe just one more question if you have a minute, which is like, are there other things that you do outside of teaching? Are you involved in other community work or?
Oh my goodness. I'm very active in my church. I go to St. Paul AME Church in Central Square in Cambridge, and I'm active there. I co-lead a women's group, and we meet once a month. We just met on Sunday, yesterday, and we look at issues of our own spirituality and our own realities, being in touch with the Holy Word, the Holy Scriptures. I'm also part of a group of women who set the communion table. We're called stewardesses. And we do this 4 times a year. And so I work with that group. I've just gotten involved with a group called the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. And there we look at social justice and issues around housing and healthcare, and to bring attention and change. Issues like police brutality. And so we look at real social issues that impact communities.
That's great.
So I work with that. I do writing on the side, and I write spiritual, inspirational messages to women at my church and outside of my church on a weekly basis. And what else do I do? I'm a gardener. Oh,
me too. I'm a gardener too. I love gardening.
How's your garden this summer?
Oh, my garden is really rocking this summer. I have
what do you have?
Well, I have a greenhouse that I built a couple of years ago.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I've got everything going up. I got tomatoes, peppers, all kinds of stuff. I'm big on gardening. I love it. Let me see if I can find a picture. I'll share.
Okay. Well, my house, my daughter says, looks like an Amazon, the Amazon, because I have plants everywhere.
Oh, nice. Yeah, this one's, I don't know if you can see it. That's my greenhouse. Maybe.
Ooh, nice.
I have my green screen on, so it's not showing up, but there's tomatoes, and I got microgreens, and I do peppers and broccoli, and I do with cucumbers and all the vining things like peas and stuff. So
you have a small farmer's market.
Yeah, well, it's nice. I go out there for lunch. I do have lettuces and beet leaves and microgreens, so I go out there for lunch and get my own lunch. It's nice. I love gardening. It's very relaxing for me. But It's
It
also,
is.
I also like that it's such an act of hope. You know, you plant the seeds and then they grow and you nurture them through the whole thing. It takes a lot of care to do it
It
well.
does. It does. I know in my kitchen right now and in my bedroom, I keep running light classical music for my plants because they just really like it.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, we have a lot of house plants too. So, but yeah,
Plants are wonderful. They're calming and they have personality.
they do. They do have personality. So, cool. That's great. It's nice to meet a fellow gardener.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I really
No,
appreciated talking with you. And I
it's
thought
okay.
you did a
I
great
hope
job.
this has been helpful.
Oh yeah, it's been amazing. I love so much of what you said in here. I mean, there's a lot that I would like to include. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.